This week, we welcome Kashmir Hill, a tech reporter at the New York Times and author of Your Face Belongs to Us.
Essentially, there's been people working to develop facial recognition technology going back to basically to Silicon Valley before it was even called Silicon
Right.
Valley, like the late 1950s, early 1960s, secretly funded by the CIA, trying to get computers to recognize faces. And in the last 10 years or so, it's really been open source. The people working on it have shared their algorithms, and it's become this kind of group project. And companies like Facebook and Google developed this ability internally to kind of take a photo of a stranger and figure out who they were and decide to hold it back because they thought it was too dangerous. But meanwhile, the capabilities were being shared in this open source community, and Huantan Tat and Clearview were able to take advantage of that and
Right.
build a very powerful tool with photos just scraped from the internet en masse.
This is Walk-ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback and we want to hear from you. If you like our work and want to support us, the best way to do that is join Phetasy.com. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, discounts on merch, and the ability to submit questions for some of our upcoming guests. Support your favorite scrappy little internet heroes at Phetasy.com. Walk-ins Welcome is brought to you by Patriot Gold. Call 888-614-9238 for a free investor guide today. Okay, I'm with Kashmir Hill. Welcome to Walk-ins Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm just a huge fan of yours for the record. I have been following your work pretty intensely, particularly since 2020 when the piece you did on Clearview facial recognition was in the New York Times. And I think I messaged you even back then, and I was like, I need to have you on to talk about this. And you told me that you were writing a book, which is now out. Your Face Belongs to Us. And how is it going? Let's just start there. How are you doing?
Good. It's good to finally have it out in the world. I think that's probably how anybody who writes a book feels. It's nice to talk about what's kind of been obsessing me for the last 4 years.
Yeah, that's one of my first questions is how did you get into journalism, and particularly it seems like your focus has been privacy. So did your mom read your journal when you were a kid? Like what is the focus on privacy?
Yeah, for me, it was partly, I think, because I got into journalism as a second career. I started doing journalism in my late 20s, and specifically, I was doing it. One of the first places I worked was this legal kind of tabloid blog called Above the Law, and was writing about lawyers and law school students and judges at a kind of level of scrutiny that wouldn't have happened in journalism probably before the internet. It was just kind of the endless newsprint of the internet. And I was just thinking about my responsibility as a journalist and how invasive the practice of journalism was. That I was writing about these people that wouldn't have been public figures in an earlier time, and how much information I could find out about them by going to their Facebook page. I remember this one law school student had set fire to a September 11th memorial in New York City. And when I went to his Facebook page, he kind of cataloged his evening up until then. And I was just like, wow, everyone's putting all this out there to be consumed. And as a blogger at this site, I was kind of a figure of interest. And so readers of the blog would find social media profiles I'd forgotten about, like my MySpace page, uh, found my anonymous OkCupid profile and linked it in the comments. And so I was just thinking a lot about how the internet was changing, our ability to be private. And I really wanted to focus on that in my journalism.
Wow. It really is interesting. I've been rewatching The Wire just because I feel like rewatching it. I don't know if it was inspired by just reading your book too. I just have been revisiting it and looking at the laws and just in The Wire, just how difficult it was for them to get a wiretap and how much writing they had to do and the presenting of the evidence. What is the legality around this looking like from your perspective?
The legality around privacy generally or
Privacy
facial
generally.
recognition
Yeah,
technology?
privacy generally.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because I've been reading this book called The Listeners by Brian Hockman, which is actually about the kind of rise of the wiretap and these tiny recording devices and how society was shocked by it and how there was this time when people felt like you just couldn't have a private conversation. It was impossible. And they kind of thought privacy was over. And then we passed laws to kind of rein it in, and so it's a really actually a good moment in time of showing how we can control technology with laws and policy. Um, but yeah, with privacy, I mean, we have been slow to pass federal privacy laws. And I don't think in general we've kind of kept up with the technological advances and the ability to collect information at a scale that's never been possible before and what can be done with it. Like, I just don't think we've kept up as a country. um, Particularly in comparison to Europe, which has
Yeah.
passed a really strong privacy law that plays a big role in the book in terms of determining how things went down differently with facial recognition technology there versus here. Where we have seen privacy laws kind of developing is at the state level. Local has been more effective than national for whatever reason.
That's really interesting. I wonder why that is. That's fascinating to me that it's not something that has been federally pushed or passed.
I mean, I think that um, it's difficult finding the right line because there's so many advances and benefits that come from data usage and data collection, and I think there's been some fear of of kind of getting in the way of the technology industry by passing too many laws regulating this. And technology is the kind of bright shining light of the American economy, and so I think there's been pushback from technology companies from passing too many laws, and then also probably from the government itself, which also benefits in many ways from data collection for safety and security reasons. So
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of factors that have made it um, have made it that we have not passed many laws.
I think the most terrifying thing for me reading your book was just it was a kind of paragraph in your intro where it talks about how this could be manipulated and used just at a widespread the facial recognition technology that Clearview it has and is capable of. Just if you are out and about and you cut someone off or flick them off and they snap a picture of you, or if you reject someone in a bar, or you have a date, or it really is mind-boggling and endless. And as someone with a a new baby, I've been very hesitant to put her picture online at all, and kind of order all of the grandparents and everybody else, because it's not just you, it's also like your family members or whoever else, if they're posting pictures of a family event, and now their face is out there. And I don't know, because I've followed your work and because I'm weirdly obsessed with this stuff, I'm unsettled by her image, just her losing her privacy before she even has any control over it.
Yeah, I just wrote a piece about this for the Times actually, about, there are these public face search engines now, and, it is possible to kind of upload a photo of somebody and find all these different images of them. And I was testing one of them out and I put my own image in and it pulled up, a bunch of photos of me. I did it for my husband and then I did it for my daughter who was 5 at the time. And it pulled up this image of her that I had posted in a story I'd written for Gizmodo. And that shocked me because one, I didn't realize that facial recognition technology kind of would work on a younger face because historically it didn't work very well with kids' faces. And then two, that I'd forgotten I put that image of her out there.
Right.
Um, and this story was about how more than just the idea that, someone takes a photo of your kid on the playground and is able to kind of figure out details about them, also the what can be done now with their voice,
Yeah.
and recounted this story about a woman who got a call from somebody who said they kidnapped her 15-year-old daughter. She could hear her daughter talking, screaming for help, was convinced her daughter was kidnapped, was negotiating with the kidnappers to pay something like $50,000, and called her, had somebody there call her husband, and he relayed that actually their daughter was safe at home in her bed. And these scammers have been able to take her daughter's voice and create a deep fake of it. This is happening. I've been hearing too, it's so strange. It feels like unlikely you'll be targeted by it, but it is starting to happen to people. This kind of deep faking a loved one's voice, saying they're in trouble and they need money immediately, whether it's because they're
Mhm.
kidnapped or they've been in a car accident, they need a lawyer. Yeah, it's just there's all these unexpected ways that the information that you put out there can come back to be used against you. And that is one of the biggest challenges in privacy, is not being able to anticipate the technological developments and what will be possible.
Yeah, it's crazy to me with like the deep fakes that just hasn't been outright banned. Deep fakes seem like something that you can put anybody in a porn, you can do in terms of just the coming election. I keep saying this online, we are not prepared. I mean, I see how much stuff, even in the past couple of weeks, that I recognize from Syria has been shared as this is Gaza or this is Israel or this is all of the stuff that's been shared. And this is not even stuff that's faked, it's just old. And people just uncritically share it and somehow think that they're going to be smart enough to out to know when something is a deep fake or to know when the audio isn't actually that person because it's been generated. What is as someone who kind of lives and breathes this, what is someone's best defense, not personally with their own information? I mean, you could do whatever with someone like me or you who does interviews and is out there, but what's someone who's consuming media, what do you recommend for them to inoculate them against this new form of just mis and disinformation?
Yeah, I mean, I think knowledge is power. So knowing what's possible is important. And, misinformation, disinformation is not new. It's been happening for decades in various forms. I do think the technological advances could make it more challenging. But I think when you're, consuming information online, just sitting with it a bit. Finding out where it came from, not reacting instantly, just knowing that there are a lot of bad actors out there that
Mm,
are trying to, muddy the debate, muddy the waters about what's actually happening in the world. And so just taking a moment and just making sure that you understand where the information you're seeing is coming from. And if it does seem unbelievable, maybe just taking a minute, sitting with it, and not immediately, rebroadcasting it or projecting your feelings about it. I do think that we're going to have to be more careful than ever about the information that we take in. And that's whether you saw it on, a social media platform like Twitter or Facebook or X, I guess as it's called now, or even if it's somebody calling you, and claiming to be holding your daughter captive.
that's
Or somebody,
crazy.
yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's just I think that we're in an environment right now where we just need to be more media literate than ever, and making sure
Yeah,
what
that
we're
just
seeing is what we think it is.
yeah, I think that's the craziest thing about this is that I don't know what that does. I know that misinformation, disinformation, it's always existed. I just wonder if it's ever been at the level where you really can't trust that nothing you see or hear is real.
I mean, I remember a decade ago covering, it was one of the hurricanes that hit New York, and there were people that were putting these fake images out
I
there.
remember this.
Yeah, remember that? Like, it's even Orson Welles, with War of the Worlds, or
Yep.
what was it? And, people listening to it on the radio and thinking it was true. And that's decades and decades ago
Yeah.
on old radios. I mean, it is the case that we can be deceived by what we see and what we hear.
Yep.
Um, and so that part of it is not new. It is so fast now, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we do tend to, a lot of us are consuming information in these like tiny little bits, as headlines, as videos, and it's out of context. Like, we don't know when exactly this video was filmed, or if it's real or it's been manipulated. So I do
Right.
think I do think it requires that we as humans slow down in reaction to how fast information is moving. And that's, yeah, maybe getting your information like this, getting it in a podcast, like getting it in a slower place that gives you some time to reflect on it and think about it before you react to it.
Yeah, the tough thing about podcasts is that you can't fact check. I don't know. I mean, you can't fact check in real time unless you have someone fact checking in real time, and even then, but it's very challenging. I find the conversations amazing because I like to just let people be themselves and talk about their life and their story and whatever they've learned, but it's unless you're kind of an expert or you're somebody who likes to debate, it's very hard to push back on something that might not be blatantly true. So you have people listening to all kinds of podcasts where all kinds of things just get presented as truth and get unchallenged. And so I find that I don't necessarily, I've learned a lot from podcasts, but I also find that it requires a lot of work to then go verify if what I'm hearing is actually true. Or I've taken to listening to more books, I think, than podcasts recently. Just for that reason, I feel like at least books have to go through a process of fact checking and there's some kind of
Ideally, they go through a process of fact
ideally.
checking. The author actually has to hire, in many cases, their fact checker. So for my book, Your Face Belongs to Us, I hired a fact checker to go through it and help me ensure that everything was accurate. But not all books are fact checked. And so it's
Right.
always good to turn to the back of it, look at the acknowledgments, and see if they thanked a fact checker.
Did you know that JP Morgan and Wells Fargo both forecast gold to hit all-time highs in 12 to 18 months? Barron's warns the stock market looks like the dot-com boom before the bust. The Magnificent Seven all tech stocks account for more than 25% of 2023's gains. Meanwhile, Fortune warns the S&P is heading below 3,000. Two of the biggest stock market crashes happened in October 1929, and Black Monday, 1987. So seasonally, we are entering the best 6-month period for gold and silver. Along with the Fed nearing the end of their rate hikes, gold is poised to skyrocket. Call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention Bridget Phetasy and you'll always get best-in-class service from Patriots protecting Patriots. Patriot Gold Group has the no-fee-for-life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no-fee-for-life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Call 888-614-9238 for a free investor guide today. Patriot Gold Group is a Consumer Affairs top-rated gold IRA dealer 7 years in a row. Call 888-614-9238 and get yourself some gold and silver.
Two sisters, one a respected TV producer, Jill Blackstone, and the other, Wendy. She was disabled, nearly blind and deaf, and Jill had devoted herself to taking care of Wendy.
Jill was her best friend, her sister, her everything.
But the sister bond was shattered when Wendy and some of the sisters' rescue dogs were found dead in a garage next to a toppled-over barbecue grill. Jill says accidental carbon monoxide poisoning killed everyone. Police do not believe her.
Police arrested Jill Blackstone for the murder of her sister.
Investigators think it was staged to look like an accident.
Who will you believe, especially now that a secret source has come forward with evidence never made public before?
Jill was a good producer. There's no doubt about that. But would she produce murder is the question.
Season 2 of Bad Bad Thing, The Blackstone Sisters, available now wherever you get your podcasts.
I always say, show me a perfect family. I'll show you a family with secrets.
I've learned so much just from everybody about the way even my husband, he's such a skeptic, consumes information and media, is generally reading the headline and then acknowledging to himself why he's having just noticing what reaction he's having, then asking himself, why do I want to believe this or why do I not want to believe this? And then if there's a study, reading the study, then looking at who the study was sponsored by. It's like, who has that time, and for every single story that they read, and then you throw in like all of the ways that it can be manipulated now, and I don't know. I wonder what it's doing to people's brains, what psychologically that toll that it takes on people over time, or if you just adapt, or if the next generation down is just more. Is your sense that like Gen Z is more savvy, media savvy?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't done a survey, so it would be just me. Yeah. Anyways, since we're talking about trustworthy information, I don't want to just speculate on that.
Yeah.
I do love. There's this one woman on TikTok who reads the New York Times and kind of just like talks about what's in the articles, and I do love seeing that because, and I'm tooting the horn of my own employer, but I think that the New York Times is a really responsible news source, and that all of us who work there spend a lot of time making sure that what we're writing is accurate and fair and true. So yeah. So I don't want to speculate on Gen Z in general, but I will say that just bringing a powerful sense of skepticism to kind of the information and media you're consuming, wherever you are consuming it, is probably a good thing.
I love the intro to your book. It's one of my favorite intros, just because I think your book has a lot of. It's one of those investigative journalism reports and stories where there feels like it's high drama, and your intro does such a great job of bringing you into your story. And just for my listeners, how did you come upon this story of Clearview and the facial recognition technology?
Yeah, so the book really started in the fall of 2019. I was doing this kind of fellowship program. I was in Switzerland for a week, and there was a bunch of people that were part of the program. I was in my hotel room. It was late at night. Everyone else was out partying still, but I was like 6 months pregnant, so I was going to bed, and I opened up my email, and I have an email from a public records researcher who I knew named Freddie Martinez. I knew him from kind of the privacy security world, and he said that he'd come across something crazy. This company called Clearview AI that was selling, this is how he put it, they were selling Facebook photos to the cops.
Wow.
And he said, I think they've passed the Rubicon on facial recognition technology, and I think you might be interested in this. And he forwarded as an attachment a PDF from the Atlanta Police Department. And he'd gotten it in this FOIA request to the police department about facial recognition technology. And they said that essentially they were using this, they talked to this company called Clearview AI, and in the PDF they had this legal memo written by Paul Clement, who's a really high profile lawyer, used to be the Solicitor General of the United States, now in private practice. And he'd written this memo that had been given to the Atlanta Police Department about Clearview AI, how it worked, that it had scraped billions of photos from the public internet, from social media sites like Facebook and Instagram and Venmo and LinkedIn without anyone's consent, that they had billions of faces. And he was explaining to police that they could use Clearview AI and not worry about breaking any state or federal laws. So he's basically saying it's okay to use this. You won't be doing anything illegal, which is kind of a wild memo to see.
Yeah.
And Freddie was like, would you be interested in writing about this? And I said, I called him right away. I said, hey, I'm in Switzerland. I'll be back in New York on Monday, and I am very interested. I want to figure out what this company is and if they can really do what they say they can do.
And then you just kept following what seems like dead ends until finally you got to some people.
Yeah, when I first started looking to Clearview AI, they didn't really have anything online. Their website didn't say anything about facial recognition technology, that they built this app to kind of identify anyone. It just said artificial intelligence for a better world. And you could say request access and put your email address in, which I did, and nothing happened. And there was an address there, an office address in Manhattan. And it was, when I mapped it on Google Maps, it was only a few blocks away from the New York Times. And so I walked over to try to find the building, like just go to their front desk and introduce myself. And I got to where the building was supposed to be, and it just wasn't there. It was like a fake address, which was wild. I'd never quite had that experience before. And I kept trying to figure out who's behind this company and talk to somebody connected to the company. And I was hitting dead end after dead end. No one returned my calls. They wouldn't respond to emails. And so I ended up looking for police officers who would use the app, because I wanted to see, like, is this snake oil or does it really do what they say it does? And when I would talk to police officers, they would say, it's amazing. It works like no facial recognition technology we've used before. Like, basically, it's helping me solve case after case after case. But every time I talked to a police officer, um, they would offer to run my photo so I could see what the results look like. And at that point, they would basically stop talking to me.
So
One of them,
crazy.
one of them said, I ran your face and there's no results. And we both agreed that was very strange because I had so many photos online. And then he stopped talking to me. And finally, I figured out that the company had put an alert on my face. So they knew every time a police officer ran my photo, and they were calling the officers and telling them, don't talk to her. And that was pretty chilling for me because it showed that Clearview AI knew who law enforcement was searching for and had the ability to control whether they were findable or not. They like blocked my face from having results. And so it was a very shocking kind of start to the investigation. And I don't know. I don't know if they were trying to deter me. It made me more interested than ever in figuring out what was going on. Who were the people behind this company?
So, what was the most interesting thing that you found in researching your book?
What was the most interesting thing? So,
Something surprising that maybe, or was just the whole investigation shocking? But was there something that really blew your mind in a way that you were not expecting?
there were so many fascinating things. I mean, one was I just went back. I mean, the Clearview AI, the company itself, it was like fiction, kind of how they came together, the people behind the company, just such a ragtag team that they were able to, without, kind of technological genius, build this incredible and revolutionary app and kind of break this taboo. And yeah, just create this app that not only puts a name to a face, but finds all of these photos of someone on the internet, possibly photos they don't even know about. Like, I just couldn't believe how they kind of came together. It was just such a incredible story, and they're such strange and interesting characters. And so the story of Clearview AI I thought was really fascinating, but also just the story of facial recognition technology and how far back it went, this kind of desire to examine the face and figure out who a person is or what they might be like. And so kind of just digging into physiognomy and this kind of Victorian age science of thinking you can know from someone's face whether they'll be a criminal or how intelligent they are, just kind of that this idea that the soul is kind of written into the face, which seems like a science that's really been discredited. But I kept finding these recent studies where current scientists, computer engineers, think that they can data crunch the faces of criminals
Oh,
and
wow.
figure out features that tell you whether someone is going to be a criminal. That we keep seeing this in kind of replicated in AI.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it was so much.
Where is Clearview now? Is it, more, it seems like it's more out in the open.
Yeah, so what Clearview is doing is more out in the open. This company is still based in New York, still kind of fronted by Juan Tat, this kind of tech guy, grew up in Australia, always loved technology, playing with computers. At 19 years old, he dropped out of college and flew to San Francisco and just moved there and decided he was kind of going to become part of this tech gold rush, tried to make it in Silicon Valley for a few years, was making Facebook quizzes and iPhone games when the iPhone first came out, and, moved to New York, was making, again, kind of just stupid apps, something called Trump Hair, to put Trump's hair on the heads of people in
Right.
photos, and then creates this revolutionary kind of shocking app, Clearview AI. Um, and
How did
and
he create this?
I mean, that's the story of the book, right? Like,
Yeah.
how did this crew of people do this? And when I first started looking at Clearview AI, I thought they must be just masterminds, just savants, at technology. But part of the story of the book is the way that essentially there's been people working to develop facial recognition technology going back to, I mean, basically to Silicon Valley before it was even called Silicon
Right.
Valley, like the late 1950s, early 1960s, secretly funded by the CIA, trying to get computers to recognize faces. And it's just been going on for decades. And in the last 10 years or so, it's really been open source. The people working on it have shared their algorithms, and it's become this kind of group project. And companies like Facebook and Google developed this ability internally to kind of take a photo of a stranger and figure out who they were and decide to hold it back because they thought it was too dangerous. But meanwhile, the capabilities were being shared in this open source community, and Huantan Tat and Clearview were able to take advantage of that and
Right.
build a very powerful tool with technology that was shared in this community on top of photos just scraped from the internet en masse. They now have 30 billion faces in the database, and I think this is where we started, but they are still operating. They have a big contract with ICE at the Department of Homeland Security, who are using it for specifically, I know the usage is child crime investigators who use this to figure out when they have a photo of abuse, figuring out who the abuser is, possibly who the child is, because Clearview AI does have children's faces in their database.
Hmm.
They have, just contracts with lots of police departments, and they're kind of actively getting used. And so any police department that is using their technology when they are trying to solve a crime and they have a suspect's face and they run it through Clearview AI, they are running it through a database of billions of faces, including all of us. And that's where Clearview AI is right now. And at the end of the book, I talk about how they're working on these augmented reality glasses.
Yeah, I saw. Ugh,
So that you could
that's
do
what I
this in
wonder.
real time. Yeah.
Yeah, that part was chilling to me. That you can just walk around and identify anyone and know where they work, know where they live, potentially know the amount of information we've put out there will probably be looked back and they'll be like, why did these idiots all do this?
I do think that because of things like Clearview AI, because of kind of in general this rise of the AI industry, generative AI, just all these companies that are going out on the internet and just scraping, just like everything in the
Everything.
kind of public commons is seen by them as training fodder. I do think there is going to be a benefit to posting more privately, kind of putting up walls around data and making it more proprietary, for fear of just having everything sucked up by a Clearview AI or an Open AI or kind of any company that is coming along, that can create value out of what is a kind of free online resource.
I know, it's nuts. Even it's funny too how personally AI takes things. I use this search engine u.com, which is AI. It's not like it will just generate lots of things. It's an AI backed search engine. as they're all kind of becoming. And I was looking for the subtitle to your book or something like that earlier, and I wrote, your face belongs to us. I just put the title of the book in. And places like Google and whatnot would generally recognize that as a title and kind of search. I didn't put it in quotes, but it usually would bring up more titles. But the U.com answer was, I'm sorry if there was any confusion, but as an AI language model, I don't have a physical form or face. I exist solely as a program running on a computer server. My purpose is to assist with answering questions and engaging in conversations to the best of my abilities. Is there something specific you would like to know or discuss? And I was just laughing like, wow, you took that really personally. That pretty general just search suddenly got very personal. AI.
That's funny.
Yeah.
He says, I don't have a face, so it doesn't belong to anybody.
So wild, except your face belongs to me. I think of just all the ways that this can, in some ways I laugh because the capabilities are the same as most of my female friends on dating apps. You'll be like, hey, can you find something out about this guy? And my friend will come back and be like, his mom bought a house in Atlanta in 1997. You're like, what? How did you get that information in like 2 seconds? But if you're looking for another podcast with lots of random guests, interesting people who you never really know who you're going to hear from, might I suggest the Jordan Harbinger Show? Each episode is a conversation with a different fascinating guest, and when I say there's something for everyone here, I really mean that. In one episode, Jordan talks to a hostage negotiator from the FBI who offers techniques on how to get people to like and trust you, which sounds useful and disturbing at the same time. He's also sat down with just so many luminaries of our time: Malcolm Gladwell, Kobe Bryant, Ray Dalio, Mark Cuban, Matthew McConaughey, Dennis Rodman. So many interesting people you've never heard of and so many big names. We really enjoy this show and we think you will as well. Search for The Jordan Harbinger Show. That's HARB as in boy, IN as in Nancy, GER on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Walk-ins Welcome is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to me, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now: getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $750 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. The average woman is pretty savvy at finding information out about anybody with one simple picture. But,
well, I mean, she may be doing a reverse image search, which is like looking for that exact search elsewhere on the internet, or she may be using this kind of Clearview copycat similar face search engine that Clearview AI has this huge database, 30 billion faces, and they scrape social media. It's kind of the biggest engine and it's limited to law enforcement, but there's these other public face search engines now that have smaller databases, but they still can work pretty well for this. There's one called PIMIze, there's another called facecheck.id. And yeah, you can take someone's face and upload it, and it will look for other photos of them on the internet. And so we're really at this point where this kind of superpower is starting to spill out to where anyone can use it. And, there's clearly good use cases for something like this, like solving crimes by identifying the suspect using facial recognition technology, whether it's Clearview AI or a different company that just looks through, criminal mugshots or state driver's license photos. You can see the appeal of that. maybe even using it to research this person, that the stranger you met on the internet, to make sure they are who they say they are.
Mhm.
I can see the appeal of this, but I think it would be very chilling to kind of be subject to this all the time, for governments
Mhm.
to be able to track us everywhere we go, identify us at protests, companies just recognizing us when we walk in the door and having like scores attached to us. Like, I know this person makes this much money. Let's give them better
Aren't they
service.
already doing this
And
though?
I don't think they're recognizing your face when you walk in the door, unless they're Madison Square Garden, which installed facial recognition technology a few years ago for security threats. And then the last year started using it to keep out lawyers
We
who
covered
work
this on my show
at law
Dumpster
firms.
Fire.
Yeah.
I
Like,
thought it was Radio City Music Hall this
Ra-
happened.
Madison Square Garden owns Radio City Music Hall
Okay.
and Beacon Theater and MSG, the like big stadium. And yeah, if you work at a law firm that sues Madison Square Garden or any of its companies, you get banned and you
Yeah.
can't go in. It doesn't matter if you're working on the case or not. If you work at a firm, this is like clearly a way to deter lawsuits. And so we're already seeing this kind of happening in the real world. I thought that was a very shocking use case. And what was interesting to me is that Madison Square Garden could do it in New York because there's no real laws around the use of people's biometric information. But Madison Square Garden also owns a theater in Chicago, and it couldn't keep out lawyers with facial recognition there because Illinois has this law. And I tell the history of it in the book, called the Biometric Information Privacy Act, or BIPA. And it says you can't use somebody's biometrics, including their face print, without their consent, or you'll be fined up to $5,000. And so MSG can't do that in Chicago. And so it's a
Interesting.
very good
Yep.
example of how we can create laws to regulate this, to control how this gets used. We just kind of have failed to do that, even as facial recognition technology has gotten so powerful and so strong. And yeah, I hate to think about the idea of because I wrote this book, it's in my mind now. And sometimes I'll be having dinner and I'm having kind of like a sensitive chat. And, we all do that because we assume we're anonymous in that space. Even if there's people around us, they're strangers to us. So I think we're kind of indiscreet in situations like that. But we live in a world now where it could be possible, if somebody's sitting next to you and they find what you're saying interesting enough, they might say, "Oh, I wonder who this is," and snap your photo, upload it to one of these sites, and all of a sudden they know, your name, where you work, and they can put together the context of your conversation. I just think that intrusiveness, that ability, would be very chilling for us, on top of the ways it could be used by companies and by governments.
Well, and just as a reporter, what happens if you're out and about? How do you deal with like meeting sources or something like how do people who are operating in other countries, I mean, how does that, especially in countries where like China, where they're just very open to this and it's not regulated at all? How would you ever have any privacy?
Yeah, I mean, so the first time that Juan Tat ran a search of my face with Clearview AI and it pulled up all these photos of me, one of them was at an event I had been at where I was with a source, somebody I was writing about, and I was like, I didn't know that photo was out there. I didn't know it was on the internet. And I just thought, wow, I need to be more careful if I'm with a sensitive source, even in a group kind of environment like that, where I just wouldn't expect to be recognized. If somebody takes a photo of that and it ends up on the internet. So anytime you go to a concert now, like, a concert is not a place to carry on an illicit affair because there's lots of photos at concerts. Very likely they end up on the internet. This is going to be something that's findable and linked to your face. So I think, in a world where this is a very commonly used technology, you'll have to think differently about doing anything private in a public space where people might take photos that end up on the internet. It's also, while I was working on this book, there was a warning that went out from the CIA to its agents around the world. And they said, we need to be more careful with our informants. They are being compromised. They are being killed because of advances in artificial intelligence, including facial recognition. So the assumption I made seeing that was that, yeah, the time of leaving your phone, at home, going out, rendezvousing with somebody in a dive bar, in a private place, it's just going to be in a place where there's facial recognition that's deployed on all the cameras, it's just going to be possible to put that together. You'll just be able to quickly look and say, you know, we know this person's a CIA agent. Who have they met with? Who have they crossed paths with? And you can just quickly like check the video playback and find out. I mean, it's just very kind of chilling to think about how hard it will be to kind of maintain your privacy, maintain some sense of anonymity in a world in which this technology is just very, very widely deployed.
Yeah, my friend had said to me, he knows people in intelligence or something, and was like kind of blown away by something he had seen. But he said it's not that when they say they are looking for a subject, they already know who it is. It's generally when you hear like, oh, so the so-and-so is looking for this subject, they're not trying to figure out who it is. They usually already know from facial recognition. They just don't know where they are. But and that was interesting to me to think about, that they generally know who they're looking for. It's just trying to track that person down once if they've committed a crime, because these databases are kind of ubiquitous now and they're so powerful. But
after January 6th, the FBI had all these images of people that had been involved, had, gone into the Capitol, because there were so many photos on social media and videos. And so they were putting out all these faces saying, we're looking for this person, we're looking for this person. And I talked to police officers who just started going through those photos and running those pictures through Clearview AI, trying to get hits. And if they found somebody that they felt they were pretty certain it was a match, because they were able to find, other photos of them on the internet wearing the same clothes, then they would send it to the FBI and say, hey, I think that this is this person. So yeah, I mean, it
how
is
accurate
a very
is it?
useful tool. So the company claims that they have something like 98.6% accuracy. They have, when I first wrote about them, they hadn't kind of had that tested by an independent body, but they've since, there's a federal lab called NIST that tests facial recognition algorithms. There's hundreds of them, and it rates them according to all these different tests. And Clearview AI did come out with they came out of that test with a very high ranking. The first time they did it, they were kind of ranked highest of all the US-based facial recognition companies. These rankings shift kind of all the time, but they do have a very powerful algorithm. That said, they can get it wrong. I wrote with my colleague Ryan Mack about a case of a man who was arrested in Atlanta. He was driving to his mother's house the day after Thanksgiving, gets pulled over by 4 cop cars, asked to step out of the vehicle. They start arresting him. They say, you're wanted for larceny in Jefferson Parish, and we're going to need to extradite you to Louisiana. And he's like, what are you talking about? I've never been to Louisiana in my life. I did not commit larceny there. And he ended up being held in jail for a week before this was cleared up, awaiting extradition to Louisiana for this crime. And it turned out he'd been identified via Clearview AI. He looked a lot like this person who had been essentially stealing purses in and around New Orleans. And yeah, but it took hiring. He had to hire lawyers. He sat in jail. He missed work. I mean, it was a really poor example of police investigative work. Like, they didn't really do anything beyond the face match to tie him to the crime. But yeah, so it can go wrong, and it can really mess up your life if police don't do the kind of investigating that they should be doing after a suggested face match, because it's not perfect.
This reminds me, it's not the same thing, but it reminds me of a story. I think it was in New York Times that they did about the people who were arrested, who were locked out of their phones for child porn or whatever. Like, Google would just shut down their whole phone. They couldn't get their pictures back. They couldn't. And
I wrote that story.
Okay, that was you. That was
Yeah.
you. I talked about this on Rogan, actually. We brought it up because I was like, have you read this story? It's insane. I thought it was you, but I, in the moment, was not sure. And that story was insane too. It's like, there's no recourse at all. And some of these people have lost all their child's photos. And I'm not exactly sure how you do what you do, although you don't seem totally black-pilled on the technology. I feel like I would be, if I was on your beat, I would be terrified of the dystopia we're just seemingly kind of skipping into. But maybe I'm just a Luddite and I remember the before times, and perhaps, I mean, I know from people who work and talk to Gen Z that they don't have the same even idea of privacy that we have, or even the same sense that it's something we're owed. It's like laughable to them, even the notion of it. And I wonder if I saw something on your Twitter about how different, even in San Francisco and New York, you asked a question. What was the exact question you asked?
Oh yeah, I've been asking people about let's say we had this world where these augmented reality glasses exist, and you had the possibility of just recognizing people's faces and knowing who they are. Let's say it was from one of the big technology giants that knows our social graph, so they know who our friends are. Um, and so, like, let's say we could opt into facial recognition. We could say, yes, I'm comfortable being recognized either by anybody or by friends or by friends of friends. What if we could set privacy settings for our face about how public or private we want to be? And so I asked crowds of about 200 people in New York and San Francisco, if this existed, would you opt in to make your face recognizable? And in San Francisco, a third of the crowd raised their hands, yes. And asked the same question in New York, and one person raised his hand. And it was just very telling. I mean, I do feel like San Francisco lives more in the future than the rest of us. Like
Mhm.
when I was there, I just thought there's just driverless cars just kind of like zipping around the roads everywhere and you just don't see that in other American cities. But yeah, I don't know which way it's going to go, but I mean, you can see the appeal, right? Of maybe being like, if you're a person like me, I'm a New York Times reporter, maybe I want people to come up to me and like tell me their stories, or I'm trying to sell my book, I want people to know I've written this book, here, I'll talk to you about it. But there's also moments when I don't want to be recognized because I'm sitting at a restaurant with a sensitive source, or I'm having a conversation with a colleague that I think is private. There's so many moments where I don't, yeah, anyways, where I think it could backfire, just having everybody know who you are.
Got it. We'll probably
Yeah.
get to the point where you can set your facial privacy if we even get to this point where we're able to do this, depending on where you are and what you're doing.
Right? Like you're at a work conference, sure, turn it on. I want people to talk to me. But when I go play poker and I'm at a cash table, maybe I don't want everybody to know who I am because I'm
Right.
trying to withhold details about me. Yeah, I mean, I it's part of why I wrote this book, is I want people to understand what's possible, where we are now, and what might be coming, so that they're prepared for it.
If you can prepare yourself for it. Yeah, sometimes I just wonder if I'm just old. I'm not old, but I feel old compared to the younger kids who seem much more comfortable with all kinds of technology and seem to, even, we cover a lot of this stuff on my kind of satirical comedy news show Dumpster Fire. Just we always say get wrecked, big tech, and just how comfortable some people are with getting a chip inserted so that they can just have the convenience of paying for things. And there are people, I believe, is it in Sweden where they're doing this? I feel like I think it's Sweden. I feel like there is a whole test case of people who are volunteering to get this chip where they can just have everything on it, their ID, and just swipe and pay. And I love, my favorite meme in the entire history of memes is the one where it was Bill Gates and Elon Musk, and Bill Gates, they're like, no, Bill Gates is inserting chips in our brain or whatever. And then it had Elon Musk and he's like, I will literally put a chip in your brain. And they were like, cool, I want to do that. Sign me up.
I don't know. I've been reading about how it's going for the monkeys that
Not
have gotten
well.
the Neuralink chip, and it seemed kind of alarming. I like doing a lot of first person kind of guinea pig pieces, but where I like turn my house into a smart home and monitor the data, or I live on Bitcoin, but I am not going to be inserting a chip in myself anytime soon.
Something that really fascinates me too is, and something we joke about all the time in my writer's room for the show, is there is like this big discrepancy between the amount of men who use this kind of Siri technology and stuff. And my husband is like, sign me up. I want it to be convenient. I want it to be easy. And I'm like, get Alexa out of the house. I don't want her listening. I don't use Siri. I don't have it activated. And I was wondering if it was something that was common. And in our writers' room, all the guys were like, oh yeah, we all have Siri activated. And they were kind of joking, like, we're used to telling a woman what we want, asking a woman for what we want. They were joking. But they were like, men are just more comfortable with that. But I do wonder if there's some kind of, I would love to see someone do a study on that, like the adoption between men and women for these technologies. If there's higher adoption rates with men who seem to, all the men I know just love this stuff, and many of the women I know are like, no.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's benefits that come from some of the technologies. The problem is just, yeah, when it goes wrong, it can be devastating. And just the kind of, I think what worries me most about the kind of current environment we're in is that people do feel like I just get tracked all the time. Like everything I do is recorded. There's some company that's putting it into a database. I hear all the time from people who are just convinced that their phone is listening to their conversation. And then they say like, oh, I get these ads, like clearly it heard my conversation. And then I think it's funny because I'm like, well, do you take your phone into the bathroom with you? And they're like, yeah, of course. And I'm like, well, if you're so afraid of being listened to, why would you take it to the bathroom? And I do not think so. If your phone was listening to your conversation, it would definitely be illegal, and there would be like huge consequences for whatever person was recording your conversation. I think it's just that there's so much data collection that's happening and so much tracking, of what you purchase, of what you look at, of what you click, that increasingly it's possible for these companies to predict the conversations that were happening
But
because they
didn't
can
they?
see it from basically your online activity and who you're with, that you're both on the same Wi-Fi and that person bought this.
Right.
Just there's so many
It
ways of.
outed my husband when he was looking for engagement rings
Oh,
because I
really?
started getting advertised
Start getting
engagement
the ads.
rings. And I was like, are you looking for engagement rings? Because I'm getting all these ads. And he was like, this is bullshit. But didn't they out Facebook or Meta or something, or Instagram? Didn't they get in trouble didn't they have the audio on background and they had to admit that or something? I feel like they got in trouble for this.
It wasn't for recording. It was they'd given themselves permission. It was some kind of settings kind of in the
But
app,
they
and
were
everyone freaked
listening.
out about it. I don't think that they were. I cannot remember the details of it. I do remember it certainly fueled the flames of concern about smartphone listening, but I think it was a settings thing for. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look at the exact
It
thing,
is
but
weird though how you'll be talking about a random product and then it will get advertised to you.
yeah, I just think there's so much data collection that's happening, but I don't think it's because your conversations are being recorded.
I don't know that they're being recorded. I just think maybe they're listening.
I mean, it would be really wild if every single phone in America was listening to people.
It wouldn't be
And just
surprising though.
taking keywords. It would be a huge class action that would cost whatever company that is so much money. It would put them out of business, even if it was Facebook.
That's interesting. I'm always baffled. I like to just randomly play the game where I mention something that I would never talk about or like think about, and then see how quickly I get advertised that product, and it's usually within 24 hours.
That's funny.
And I don't know how that works.
Somebody's Googling it.
Sorry.
I have to hop off in 2 minutes,
Yeah.
so I just want to flag it.
Okay. What is I have the same two questions. What's your biggest defect of character?
Currently, my biggest defect of character is traveling around the country and having to do all these things with my book and leaving my husband to take care of our two daughters on his own.
And what is your biggest asset?
My biggest asset is probably my love of good stories, and just listening and finding things that are interesting, and trying to tell stories with nuance and an openness for the complexity, because so many of these things, even facial recognition technology, it's not like clear black and white, let's get rid of it or let's roll it out everywhere. All of these things are so complicated, and I think being able to tell those stories in that way that that captures the nuance is important, and I really love to be able to do that in the book and in my work at the Times.
You do a great job of it. What's your biggest fear in this beat?
My biggest fear is that my daughters grow up in a world where they really just feel like they don't have any control over their data, over their privacy, that that they feel like they're in this panopticon. I want them to have the freedom that comes from having privacy, having anonymity, making mistakes, not having every little thing you've ever done trail you for the rest of your life. That would be my fear if that's the world that they inherit.
This has been so great talking to you. I love you and your work, and I hope your book is doing well. Where can we all find you and your book?
So my book is available from all your favorite retailers, bookshop.org if you want to support independent bookstores, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I am on all the social media platforms as Cash Hill, and I'm at the New York Times writing about once a month, doing different feature stories.
Yes, your stories are great. I'm going to have to read this one about the parenting. I'll share
it just came out this weekend.
Oh, cool.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, good luck on your book tour and everything. And I can't wait for your next terrifying dystopian story to come out.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I appreciate you talking about Your Face Belongs to Us and telling all the AI bots about it.
They all know now. Have a good day.
All right, you too.
Dive into true crime on Pluto TV. Unravel the mysteries with Forensic Files and 48 Hours. Investigate crimes with Dateline 24/7 and Unsolved Mysteries. With thousands of free crime movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is the true home of crime. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming true crime on live channels and on demand. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
It's time for the weekly check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie.
Happy Halloween.
Oh, thank you. I asked my nephew what he was going to be for Halloween, and he was like, my bed. And I was like, I feel like that would be Maggie's idea of a great Halloween costume.
I was talking to one of my friends yesterday, and she has a 5-year-old, or 4 going on 5. And she was like, I was like, oh, what's he going to be for Halloween? And she was like, himself. And I was like, oh, and she was like, no, he literally doesn't want to be anything. She was like, I was offering him a bunch of different outfits and costumes. And last year he was a dinosaur. So he tried that on, but he didn't like the way, like, he was like, just didn't like the way the outfit felt. She was like, so he was like, can I just wear a t-shirt that says dinosaur on it?
I like that.
Was like, so that's what he's wearing is a t-shirt that says dinosaur on it.
I like that.
I was like, wow, he's pretty sure of himself. He knows what he wants.
Never liked Halloween. And now I have to do it. This is my punishment.
And the child is going to be
an avocado. We tried some Moana costume. I'm glad because it's a warm costume and it's freezing. So I don't even know that she doesn't even know what candy is.
No.
But it's going to be weird if people are knocking on our door. I don't know. I don't know how to handle any of it.
You can go to like 2 houses and knock and then just be like, that's it.
We're going to our neighbors. They're having a dinner. So she'll be able to like play with some, because I just feel bad. Like it's a good opportunity for her to just go have fun with some kids.
Right.
And it's such a weird thing about being a parent is having to make friends with people so your kids have a social life.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't care. You don't need a social life.
I think parents have always talked about that, especially when your kids get older in school and make friends on their own.
Yeah.
And then they have to be friendly with the parents who they basically have nothing in common with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very it's like a whole other thing about parenting.
Life and society, and just like it's a
But I
club you join or something.
It is. I do think it's why it's. God, I mean, I've just been thinking. Oh, that's what I was going to write. I wrote down like geriatric mommy, and I was going to write a topic, and then I'm like, what was it? And it was like an ode to all my free time that I no longer have. Because I think about just like the all of my feelings that you are more of a grown up when you have kids, even though I hate saying that because I don't want to offend people who don't have kids. It's absolutely true.
I 100% acknowledge it. I'm sitting here with no kids and being like, that is 100% true.
I always had that sense. And even though it was like a part of me, it made me feel like somewhat insecure. Like you could have all this stuff and a whole job and a company and you still just don't have someone waking you up at midnight being like, I have a tooth coming in and I'm crying. And,
right.
And you have to be on when you don't want to be on and you've got to go make friends with adults. And you're just constantly not comfortable.
You're putting this tiny person's needs ahead of your own.
Yeah, and you're constantly in awkward and uncomfortable or inconvenient situations.
Yeah.
And I think that when you're like, it's the thing about being single and alone that I think about all the time, just like the endless amounts of time that I could devote to myself and like my personal yoga, and I could journal. And I'm like, when was the last time I did a fun tarot card reading? Probably years ago. I have this book that I do at my little passion planners that I used to be so devoted to, and I haven't even had time to do that. I'm like, all the time that you had just stretched out before you endlessly. I just think
now you've got to go to a Halloween thing.
And I'm going to make some food for it because I don't want to show up empty handed because that's a douchey thing to do. Like get invited to a party and then be like, here we are. I hate showing up empty handed. That is like, it is my nightmare. Is showing up anywhere empty handed. It's just, if there's not enough time to get a bottle of wine or something, I always feel like such a piece of shit. Like, oh God, here I am with nothing, just mooching off of your nice invitation and house. And it was a last minute invitation, but I'm like, I'm going to make my Brussels sprouts and sweet potato.
Yeah,
like
that's good.
Easy enough and delicious and nice fall. A nice fall meal.
A nice fall dish.
Nice fall side.
Yeah, it's great. That's delicious.
So I think it's good though. It forces you to being uncomfortable is good. It's good. And not just uncomfortable in your head online, like in the real world.
In awkward social situations. Yeah.
Having small talk and
it's weird too. I mean, Halloween in general, it's such an American holiday, isn't it? Really?
I think they celebrate it everywhere in the world now, though.
Really?
I think we've
like
researched
expanded.
This. Yeah.
But it's like you spend all year teaching your kids not to take candy from strangers.
That's what I wrote about.
And then
that was exactly the newsletter I wrote about and why I hated it as a kid. And this is what I was talking about when we were doing Sarah Connor. I'm like, as a kid, it was so weird to me. Like, we came from the after school special generation. It was always like, don't take candy from strangers. And then it's like, let's dress up and go take candy from strangers.
And then still, I remember our parents having to inspect the candy to make sure there were like no razor blades or like puncture marks or anything.
Like weird
like
myth.
It's like, what?
Yeah,
what is this that we do to our children?
No, that was weird too.
I did love Halloween though. I loved like having a costume and dressing up.
I mean, the kids in costumes are cute, and like I was saying in the newsletter, I hated the like awkward going to the door and then wondering if you could like take the candy or if they gave it to you, because some people gave it to you and some people wanted you to take it, and like then there would be these like single older guys who were a little too excited about kids in costume. You'd be like, I don't know about you.
I guess this leaves me on door
and
duty.
What are you, little girl? This was like freaking. This was the weird messaging behind the Girl Scouts that always bothered me.
Selling your cookies
on the side of the street.
Soliciting from strangers.
Dress up in a little skirt and sell your cookies, little girl. The boys were learning how to start fires. And what were we doing? Hustling our cookies on the corner.
Bridget has a lot of rage.
It's just this is just the patriarchy so crafty. No, the kids in costumes are adorable. They're so cute.
I know. Her
like,
little
toddling
outfit
around.
is so adorable.
She's gonna love it.
Yeah.
It's even though it's freezing. It's freezing out. And I'm gonna dress up in my unicorn costume.
Mm-hmm.
And Jaren will be Jaren.
Tune in next week for another riveting episode that will change your life, help you get out of your own way, and solve all the world's problems. I want to thank our composer, Jared Elias, my co-producer and cousin, Maggie, and all of you out there listening. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.